Dr. Brown, how are you doing?
Hello, Jared.
Hey, thank you so much for joining tonight.
Hey, thanks for the invite, brother. I appreciate it.
Of course. So we have Dr. Irvin Brown joining us tonight. His full bio is on our website at International Dyslexia Association Oregon Branch. I'm going to challenge everyone here to go check it out. He's got an amazing story. We're going to get into a little bit of it too, along with his equity work here in a moment. So, but go read his full story. Dr. Brown, if I'm correct, you served in the Navy.
I did. I
Oh,
served in the Navy. We didn't win the football game this past weekend, but that's okay.
that's
Maybe next year.
well, I thank you for your service. That's amazing. Let's start there. Like, how did serving in the Navy prepare you for the world of education?
That's a good question. Growing up in Louisiana, growing up on a plantation, one of seven siblings, definitely influenced how I ended up doing the military. My dad was in the Army as a young man, and then one of my favorite uncles was also in the Army, and some of my older brothers went into the military as well. So for me, it was a no-brainer. So during middle school, I already knew that one day I would be in the military because I was surrounded by all these different, figures and important role models in my life that the military was going to be my ticket out. It's going to be my way out. And so growing up in a large family with some parents that were very, very stern and they pushed academics, the military was a natural fit for me. And so I enjoyed every single day of being in the Navy.
Can I ask this question? Growing up with a strict family and being in the Navy, was there did you like one versus the other, or were they both consistently tough? Because that sounds like you were in a challenging environment on both sides.
That's a good question. If my dad were here with me right now, because he's not watching this, he was way tougher than the military. And so me joining the military was easy. It was no problem getting up at 5 o'clock, going for a run because growing up down south, my siblings and I, we always got up early to do all of our chores. And so getting up early was not a problem. Saying yes, sir, and no, sir, not a problem. And so having a very strict schedule, it was easy for me to follow that in the military.
You're probably like accustomed to it at some point. It just because natural, it sounds like a natural
Oh yeah.
progression.
Oh yeah, totally, Jared. It came natural. It came natural to say yes, sir, no, sir. It came natural to, you know, making up my bed and keep everything very neat and orderly. That to me came natural. And so where some of my, fellow squids would struggle with discipline, I thrived in it.
Oh, it's amazing. And how long did you serve for?
8 years.
8 years. And then what was
Yeah.
next? So you served for 8 years, and then what happened after the 8 years? Like, what was the?
So after I left the military, so I was doing paralegal. I worked for the Judge Advocate General, the JAG, in the Seattle area. And so during that same time, I started mentoring students in a middle school. And so it was our station that really developed Adopt a School program. And so we adopted this middle school to where a lot of sailors would go there every day to mentor students, become coaches, or even help teachers in their classroom. So a lot of sailors would just go there and volunteer at the school. And so I was one of those sailors. And so I started volunteering and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with mentoring young people. I fell in love with, hanging out with teachers. It just felt like, oh, this is a good fit. I think I want to do this. I had no idea what would happen next because I started mentoring in a middle school, and then it led to mentoring into a high school. And then I ended up getting a job in a high school. And it was in that particular job in a high school to where a colleague said, he said, Irvin, you would make a great teacher. You need to go back to school and get your degree. And I was like, please, I'm not teaching because, and Jared, the reason I didn't want to teach is because I didn't like school. And so I did not like school. And so
Okay,
I
wait.
did not like,
Can I ask why you didn't like school?
oh, sure, that's a great question. I didn't like school because I had a learning difference. And that learning difference for me was one of the reasons I did not like school. And so growing up, I was always made fun of by other students because I struggled with reading. I struggled with just knowing how to communicate really clearly. And I went through years and years of therapy from elementary school all the way to high school. I was still going through therapy. And so it made schooling very, very tough for me. And so when I started mentoring students in high school, there was a colleague who said, "Hey, you need to go back to school and get your degree." And I was just like, "Please, I'm not going to do that because that's not me." I said, "I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to be the president of the United States." That's what I told him at the time. And so, and obviously, there's still a great possibility for that to happen.
Yes.
So that door opened of mentorship that really propelled me to go back to school. And so I went back to school, got my undergrad from Eastern, which is in Philly. And so got my undergrad. But the undergrad was actually in religious studies. And so that's a piece where a lot of people do not know. And so religious studies. And so I started doing youth pastoring for a while, still thinking like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Got involved with politics for a little bit. And what happened after that was I took a teaching job in Oregon. And it was that teaching job that really led me to know you today, because that teaching job pushed me to go into administration, to where I went back to school and I got my master's from Lewis and Clark. And then I became an administrator at middle school and high school level. And then I got bored again. I was like, I need to do something with my life. And so I decided to go back to school and get a doctorate. And then that just led to one thing after another, to where I began to volunteer and connect with a lot of different, agencies and businesses. And obviously now with IDA.
Yeah, and we should mention that you are now on the advisory board. You're volunteering, you're supporting the initiatives of the International Dyslexia Association Oregon branch, and also one of our board members just put on the chat 2024 if you're thinking about running for president. So
well, you know what? I am all for it, because I'm going to say this, and I may or may not get some pushback, but being a Black man today is very difficult. And I'm very thankful and appreciative that, we have a Black woman who is now our vice president. That's the sweatshirt I'm wearing right now. My vice president is a Black woman. So being a Black man, I think it's important. I think it's important to see more Black men in leadership. I think it's important to see more Black men that can not only take the front line in educating, but also leading and changing policy. That, to me, stands for a lot. I mean, when I think about the late, great Representative Lewis, who said, "Good trouble," I think it's indicative of the fact that instead of people seeing, Black men as a threat, or seeing us as the aggressors, or seeing us as individuals that are basically just objects, wouldn't it be great to see us as individuals that are doing good, and we're doing things to make America better? We know we're already great. Now let's be better.
I love that. That is powerful stuff. And on that note, I want to talk about what you're seeing in the education system, because we're talking about especially our students of color, our Black students, getting them in position for those leadership opportunities, getting them in position to do great things. But there's a little bit of a disconnect, or a big disconnect, I would say, going on within. And maybe you can elaborate further on that.
Yeah, I definitely want to say there is a bit disconnect, but it would be unfair for me to talk about the current disconnect without looking back at our history. One of the things that I know for sure is this. I think about Sankofa. Sankofa literally means to look back, go back and get what you lost. And so it's important to peel back the layers of our time to look at our history. For example, we know right now that brown and black students are suspended at a higher rate than our white students. We know that. But we got to go back to the history to figure out, how did that come to be? And I'm a firm believer that we got to go all the way back to Brown versus the Board of Education. That's where we got to go back. We got to go back to history to figure out how it came to be. At that particular time, before Brown, we had 86,000 black teachers and superintendents that were teaching our students. 86,000 black teachers and superintendents were teaching our students. Do you know what happened to them, Jared, once Brown came into effect?
I mean, I can project that, but I'm going to let you tell it.
Well, there were policies in place to where they lost their jobs. Yeah. Meaning segregation was still a very real thing. So when our black students walked into those white schools, our black teachers and superintendents were given the exit door. They could not follow. So when we think about the gap that exists today with our black students and our white students, we got to go back to history. We got to go back to see how this happened. And then if we were to trickle on up into the 80s, and this is where I'm going to get some pushback on some people. If we come up into the 80s, now we got something that's called Reaganomics. Reaganomics is all about a war on drugs. Well, it was really a war on black and brown people. And the level of mass incarceration went to its height of heights. And there's a book, The New Jim Crow, by Michelle Alexander. I really think that she should have been elected to the Supreme Court, but that's another whole conversation we can talk about next time.
I'm going to have you on. Let's do that.
Exactly. She should have been put on to the justice. But anyway, the problems we're facing today in education, it is a historical one.
Right.
It's not something that's happened in 5 years or 10 years ago. It's been happening for decades. And so in order for us to fix it, we really got to take a look at our policies. And our policies right now, they're not helping as much as we would like them to.
It's a great point. I mean, it is, you got to look back to see how we can solve those right. Injustices to move the needle forward. On that note, though, what we are seeing right now, and maybe you can elaborate further on it, is that it's hard as a student with learning challenges. It's hard.
Yes.
It's hard as a dyslexic student within our current framework. If you add a person of color to that equation, it becomes a compound fracture.
Yes.
And then if you add economic challenges on top of that, now you're in a real situation where how is that what you're seeing as well? And then how can we best support those students at this time?
Yeah, I like what you said. When you think about race, and then you throw in socioeconomic status, and then let's just add the virus.
Good point.
W.E.B. Du Bois said it this way. He said that to be black and to be an American is to live in a system to where it's a dual consciousness. In other words, you got to know what it is to be black, but you also got to know what it is to be black and live in America. So you got to figure this out. You have to navigate through a system to where you don't even know that there's a system there in place, but you have to navigate through it. So for today, if you have a young person in the classroom, and let's say the second grader is black, and let's say the second grader comes from poverty, and let's say this second grader also has a learning difference, If that learning difference is not diagnosed properly in first or second grade, we know what's going to happen. There's a policy in place right now that if that student is not given the proper interventions, the proper skills to know how to read properly, the policy in place is going to put that second grader into prison because there is a system that's in place. So we have a system in place that we're always fighting against because we have more brown and black boys that are put on the trek of special ed than any other race combined. So what do I see now? I see hope. I see us doing some good. And one of the things I want to highlight is the conversation we're having right now. I think it's important. I think it's important to have more people of color talk about their learning difference and how that impacted their learning. I like to call it learning while black. I think we need more professionals to talk about their experience because I believe that's going to help close the gap. Because if a young second grader, third grader, or even a junior in high school or a senior, if they can see me and know that I made it, then that in turn is going to instill some self-efficacy to where they're going to say, hey, I can do it too. That's right. So we need to see more of us in the classroom. We need to see more of us in front of our young people. But as you know, Jared, our classrooms today, what? It's 83, 84%. All the teachers are white. Right. And so when they don't look like me, and there's a cultural competency gap in the learning, and that teacher sees that child as a threat or sees that child with bad behavior and they're misdiagnosed, well, it's like this in the classroom. But I'm hopeful. I'm still hopeful that if we can have more conversations like this, I think that's a turnaround for us.
Yeah, and I want to say one thing to the point because, and we've talked about, you and I have had this conversation before, but the fact that you see behavior issues within a student, it might not be the behavior issues as the root cause there. The fact that they're struggling with reading or struggling with a learning challenge, that could very well be the root cause of what's occurring, and you're seeing the behavior as the symptom to that.
There you go.
And if we had the right system in place, if we were calling the right offensive plays from the top into the classroom, that could be a way to help mitigate some of that.
Yes, yes. I like what you said, Jared, because if a child is acting out in the classroom, it may not be bad behavior. It may not be ADHD. It may not be ADD. It could be that child maybe woke up this morning and didn't have any food to eat. It could be that that child woke up this morning and they found out that they lost a loved one. It could be that that child does have a learning difference and no one knows.
Yeah.
And so now this child is going to act out in a variety of ways. And how do I know this? Because I was one of those little black boys that acted out in the classroom consistently because I was made fun of. And if it had not been for my parents and my older siblings really sitting me down and teaching me how to read and how to slow down, who knows where I would be. But yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely a system that if we don't look at it through the right equity lens, I think we're going to find ourselves asking ourselves, hey, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that?
Couldn't agree more. I just think there's so much, and I think maybe that is a reason to be hopeful is, right? If we can turn the corner, if we can,
yes,
if we can implement a stronger system, if we can put more role models or people that have succeeded like yourself in front of the rooms through all the different avenues, you know, be it being a teacher or bringing speakers into the classroom, or I think that is so imperative. We need to look at it. If we innovate with the people that have been harmed the most, that's how you can build a universal system.
Yes. Well, I think you just said it. That's really having a spirit of empathy, right?
Yeah.
is when we can really look at a group of people that have been marginalized, the voices have not been heard, and nor have they been invited to the table.
Right.
Right? It's like the late great Shirley Chisholm, when she references having a seat at the table. She didn't have a seat at the table. She had to bring her own seat. She had to bring her own chair. And so I'm a firm believer that we have to create space at the table for voices that have not typically been heard or faces that have not been seen. We need to create space at the table for everyone. And one of the things, I know you're going to like this. I recall Cicely Tyson. She said this many years ago. She said, "We do not stand on the shoulders of our ancestors. We stand on their backs." And so I cling to that quote, Jared, because I know that I stand on the backs of a lot of people whose names were never known, whose faces were not seen. My ancestors paved the way for me to exist and be here today. And I think it's crucial for this generation to see more Black and brown leaders in leadership position. I'm a firm believer in that, whether it's from the White House to the back house to the outhouse, whatever house you may be in. I'm a firm believer that we need to see more brown and Black leaders in leadership positions.
And create those opportunities for those people to be in those positions.
Right. I agree. Yep.
Absolutely. So there's a rule on this show. We'll call it a show, but the guest gets the last word. It can be your message to educators, to parents, to students out there, but I want you to have the last word. And what would you like your message to be tonight?
The last word. Well, I've seen your show before, so I kind of remember that. What if I were to say, I don't want it to be my last word, but what if I were to read something? Could that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's your time.
I'm going to read this. And this comes from James Baldwin. James Baldwin said these words a long time ago when he was at a debate at Cambridge University in England. And this is what James Baldwin says. He says this: "In the case of the American Negro, from the moment you are born, every stick and stone, every face is white. Since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5, 6, or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country in which is your birthplace and to which you owe your life and identity has not, in its whole system of reality, evolved any place for you." I say that because James Baldwin paved the way for us to know that we are in a system that can be changed for the better if we were to sit down, agree to disagree, but not be disagreeable. If we could be at the same table, learn to respect and embrace our differences, and then agree to commit to the cause. James Baldwin knew that. And I believe that in my heart of hearts, that if we were to invite other voices to the table, if we were to embrace everyone, agree to disagree but not be disagreeable, I believe we can do better together than individually on my own.
If that doesn't leave this audience hopeful, I don't know what will, but that was amazing. Dr. Irvin Brown, I so appreciate you taking the time to talk with me tonight and to share your thoughts with this audience. Again, if people online have questions, please email the branch, International Dyslexia Association, Oregon branch. Again, Dr. Brown, just grateful. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. And I'm pretty sure we'll be talking on later this week. I appreciate the time and the energy and the space to share and be me. Thank you, sir.
Awesome. Have a great night.
You too. Take care, brother.